the international nuisance of Unification Church and Shincheonji. Hello, dear listeners. The story we will examine together today concerns the tragic reality unfolding across the world under the name of South Korea. This is not simply a matter of religious freedom or faith. This is a shocking exposé of how two massive fraudulent organizations originating from our country are trampling on human dignity, poisoning societies, and undermining Korea's international standing on the global stage. The Unification Church and Shincheonji. Many Koreans would shake their heads upon hearing these two names, but no matter how much we want to turn away, they are operating worldwide with the Made in Korea label. From America's Washington Times to remote regions of Africa, from major Japanese cities to South American slums, these pseudo-religious groups born in Korea are destroying the lives of innocent people across the globe. What's even more heartbreaking is that their damage extends beyond the individual level to become diplomatic issues between nations. In Japan, class action lawsuits by Unification Church victims continue unabated. In Europe, questions arise about Shincheonji's responsibility for COVID-19 spread. And in the United States, wariness toward Korean religious groups is increasing. Whether we want it or not, Korea is bearing the stigma of being a pseudo-religion exporting country. Religious scholar Harvey Cox once called the 20th century the age of myth. Despite being an era of science and reason, humans still thirst for mystery and transcendence, and groups that exploit this very thirst emerge. The Unification Church and Shincheonji are representative examples of the most vile and cunning exploitation of human religious yearning. The problem is that these are not merely local phenomena. In the age of globalization, their influence is spreading across borders. Through online evangelism, via the internet and social media, overseas expansion through international marriages, and infiltration activities under the guise of cultural exchange, they are operating on a global stage. What's particularly noteworthy is that they are exploiting Korea's cultural soft power. Taking advantage of increased interest in Korea due to K-pop, K-dramas, and the Korean wave, they approach people by packaging themselves as authentic Korean culture or traditional Korean religion. This not only plants distorted perceptions of Korean culture as a whole, but also damages the value of genuine Korean culture. Adding a somewhat cynical perspective here, ironically, while the Korean government and society are enthusiastic about exporting Hallyu, they remain relatively indifferent to the overseas spread of these Korea-originated pseudo-religions. While the Ministry of Culture, Sports, and Tourism invests hundreds of billions of won for the overseas expansion of K-content, it shows only passive responses to pseudo-religious issues that tarnish Korea's image. This situation is ultimately dealing serious blows to Korea's soft power and international credibility. No matter how much we boast about the excellence of K-culture, if the perception that Korea is a country with many pseudo-religions spreads simultaneously, all those efforts could come to nothing. What we will examine together today is a comprehensive analysis of this serious reality. We will look at how the Unification Church and Shincheonji were born, how they spread overseas, what damage they are causing in each country, and how the international community is responding. We will also consider together what we must do to fundamentally solve this problem. This is not simply a religious issue. This is a human rights issue, a diplomatic issue, and ultimately, a matter where all our consciences and sense of responsibility are at stake. For the innocent people who are becoming victims of Korea-originated pseudo-religions somewhere in the world at this very moment, and to protect Korea's true honor, we must face this uncomfortable truth. Chapter 1. The Birth of Two Monsters. Origins and Reality of the Unification Church and Shincheonji. In 1954, a man hung a sign reading, Holy Spirit Association for the Unification of World Christianity, on a shabby building in Bukhakdong, Yongsan-gu, Seoul. His name was Moon Sun-myung, then 34 years old. Around the same time, in a farmhouse in Cheongdo, Gyeongsangbuk-do, a young man named Lee Man-hee was experiencing religious awakening. No one knew that these two men would later build a massive fraudulent empire on the global stage. Moon Sun-myung's Unification Church revealed international ambitions from the beginning. The grandiose name, World Unification itself, hinted at their global plans. The early doctrine was based on Christianity, but claimed Moon Sun-myung himself as humanity's true parents. It was a typical manifestation of a Messiah complex, claiming to complete the salvation work that Jesus Christ had left unfinished. Shincheonji, on the other hand, began somewhat later in 1984. After learning the essence of heretical doctrines through Park Taeseon's Evangelical Church and Yu Jae-yol's Tabernacle Temple, Lee Man-hee built his own kingdom. Shincheonji's core doctrine was to deify Lee Man-hee as the promised pastor, prophesied in the Book of Revelation. It featured an exclusive doctrine of salvation, claiming that only 144,000 people could be saved, and those spots were monopolized by Shincheonji believers. The common point of both organizations was the absolute deification of their founders and complete denial of established religions. However, there were differences in their approaches. The Unification Church, from the beginning, put the political message of unification at the forefront and sought solidarity with conservative politicians. Shincheonji, on the other hand, chose thorough disguise and infiltration strategies. They systematized the method of hiding their identity and infiltrating existing churches to steal away believers. Adding a somewhat cynical perspective here, both organizations cleverly exploited the division trauma of Korean society and the spiritual emptiness created during the rapid industrialization process. The Unification Church used the national aspiration for reunification of the divided homeland, while Shincheonji exploited dissatisfaction with existing religions and the desire for specialness, each packaging these in religious language. This is also a typical pattern of new religions emerging during periods of social turmoil. The Unification Church's international expansion began in earnest from the late 1950s. In 1959, Kim Young-woon was dispatched to the United States to establish the first overseas church in San Francisco. It spread to Japan in the 1960s and to Europe in the 1970s. Particularly after Moon Sun-myung moved to the United States in 1972, global expansion accelerated with America as the base. Shincheonji's overseas expansion was relatively late, but began systematically in the 2000s. It spread to China, Southeast Asia, the United States, Europe, and other regions, particularly infiltrating areas with high interest in Korean culture, riding the Korean wave. They conducted missionary activities by approaching people under the guise of Korean traditional culture education or authentic Bible study, while hiding their identity. A notable point in both organizations' overseas expansion process is the sophistication of their local adaptation strategies. The Unification Church repackaged its doctrines according to each country's political and cultural situations. In the United States, they emphasized anti-communism. In Japan, Korea, Japan reconciliation, and in Africa, economic development. Shincheonji also varied its missionary strategies according to each region's religious characteristics. Religious sociologists call this phenomenon religious indigenization. However, in the case of the Unification Church and Shincheonji, it's closer to deceptive disguise rather than genuine indigenization. While appearing to adapt to local cultures on the surface, the core structure of absolute loyalty to the Korean founder and money offerings remains unchanged. From a legal perspective, both organizations are exploiting the religious freedom guarantee clauses of each country by using the guise of religious organizations. Religious freedom is one of the core values of democracy, but using it as an excuse for fraud and exploitation is a distortion of the spirit of the law. However, many governments hesitate to impose direct regulations due to the sensitive issue of religious freedom. Currently, the Unification Church claims to have expanded to 194 countries worldwide, and Shincheonji also has branches on all continents including Asia, Europe, America, and Africa. While exact membership numbers are not disclosed, the Unification Church is estimated to have several million believers worldwide, and Shincheonji several 100,000. Their economic scale is also not negligible. The annual revenue of Unification Church-affiliated companies is estimated to be in the trillions of won, and Shincheonji also operates assets worth hundreds of billions of won. These massive funds serve as the driving force for overseas expansion. However, the most serious problem is that these are not simple religious groups, but systematic fraudulent organizations. Acts of deceiving victims with false facts, extracting financial benefits, and violating basic human rights are systematically committed. This constitutes clear criminal activity beyond the realm of religious freedom. Chapter 2. A fraud network. Crossing borders. Sophisticated strategies for overseas expansion. The overseas expansion of the Unification Church and Shincheonji is by no means a product of chance. Like multinational corporations' overseas market expansion strategies, they have spread worldwide according to systematic and meticulous plans. Examining their global strategies reveals the existence of sophisticated infiltration manuals combining modern marketing theory and anthropological knowledge. The Unification Church's overseas expansion strategy is divided into 3 stages. Stage 1 is securing footholds. They establish bases in major cities of each continent and nurture local believers. Stage 2 is network building. They build relationships with influential figures in various fields including politicians, scholars, journalists, and religious leaders. Stage 3 is business expansion. They establish media companies, educational institutions, cultural organizations, etc., to expand social influence. A representative example of this strategy is their activities in the United States. The Unification Church founded the daily newspaper Washington Times in 1982. While ostensibly a conservative-leaning general newspaper, it actually served as a propaganda medium representing Unification Church ideology. They also hosted various international conferences under names like the Family Federation for World Peace and Unification and World Peace Summit, building networks with politicians. Shincheonji's overseas expansion strategy is more secretive and cunning. They enter various countries through the front organization Heavenly Culture World Peace Restoration of Light, under the guise of peace and cultural exchange. Locally, they don't reveal themselves as religious organizations, but disguise themselves as pure peace movement organizations or cultural exchange institutions. Through this method, they build cooperative relationships with government agencies or educational institutions, then gradually infiltrate religious content, adding a somewhat cynical perspective here. Their overseas expansion strategies are surprisingly similar to the methods Korean conglomerates use when entering overseas markets. All processes, including securing local partners, overcoming cultural differences, networking with government officials, and brand localization, are contents that could appear in marketing textbooks. The only essential difference is that their purpose is not selling products, but exploiting human souls. Both the Unification Church and Shincheonji are actively exploiting the Korean wave. They approach young people interested in K-pop and K-dramas by providing Korean culture experience programs. While offering free Korean language classes, Taekwondo training, and Korean cooking lessons, they naturally lead conversations toward Korea's orthodox religion. What's particularly noteworthy is their active use of digital technology. Online evangelism through YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and other social media is active. Video content produced in each country's language appears to be general cultural content or self-development programs on the surface, but gradually includes religious messages. The COVID-19 pandemic provided them with new opportunities. As face-to-face activities were restricted and online activities became normalized, this created a favorable environment for their non-contact evangelism. Online seminars using video conferencing apps and peace education and Bible study through webinars became active. Both organizations utilize international marriage as an important means of overseas expansion. The Unification Church uses its unique system of mass weddings to marry believers of different nationalities. Through this, they create Unification Church believer families in each country, making them serve as local evangelism bases. Shincheonji also encourages international marriages among believers to expand overseas networks. Economic incentives are also important strategies. In developing countries, they approach by providing scholarships, medical support, and economic development projects. While appearing to be pure humanitarian aid on the surface, they actually serve as bait for evangelism. Once relationships are formed, they gradually infiltrate religious content. Infiltration in the education sector is also serious. The Unification Church has established universities around the world. The University of Bridgeport in the United States and Sun Moon University in Japan are representative examples. While appearing to be general higher education institutions on the surface, they are actually educational institutions, spreading Unification Church ideology. Shincheonji is also infiltrating the education sector through various peace education programs. Activities in media and publishing should also be noted. Besides the Washington Times, the Unification Church owns various media outlets worldwide. These outlets spread Unification Church ideology subtly while covering general news. Shincheonji also spreads its messages through various publications and online media. Political lobbying activities cannot be overlooked either. Particularly, the Unification Church has actively built relationships with Republican politicians in the United States. Based on the common denominator of anti-communism, they gained support from conservative politicians and expanded social influence through this. The most cunning aspect of their overseas activities is that they thoroughly study local laws to target legal blind spots. They maximize the use of religious freedom guarantee clauses, non-profit organization benefits, and cultural exchange program support in each country to maintain legal facades while committing actual fraud. As a result, their overseas expansion is seriously damaging Korea's international image. The equation, Korea equals pseudo-religions, is spreading overseas, leading to the spread of negative perceptions about Korean culture as a whole. This not only undermines the achievements of Hallyu and K-culture, but also causes fatal damage to Korea's soft power. Chapter 3. The Cries of Global Victims. Tragedies unfolding in each country. Jennifer Johnson, who lived in a middle-class family in Los Angeles, California, became interested in Korean culture in 2019. As a K-pop fan, she participated after seeing an advertisement for Korean Traditional Culture Experience on Instagram. 2 years later, she had completely severed ties with her family and, having become a Shincheonji believer, donated all her college tuition as offerings. This is just one of the damage cases caused by the Unification Church and Shincheonji occurring worldwide. The damage from the Unification Church in Japan is particularly severe. Since their entry into Japan beginning in the 1960s, the cumulative damage scale over approximately 60 years has reached astronomical levels. According to estimates by the Japan Federation of Bar Associations, the economic damage to Japanese people caused by the Unification Church is estimated to exceed 1 trillion yen, approximately 10 trillion won. This is a scale that should be calculated as economic loss to Japanese society as a whole, beyond individual level damage. Particularly shocking is the Unification Church's fraud technique called spiritual sales. They create fear among Japanese people by claiming that misfortune befalls them due to ancestral sins and force them to purchase expensive seals, ginseng, marble, etc. to resolve this. One victim paid over 300 million yen, approximately 3 billion won, to cleanse ancestral sins. There are tens of thousands of such cases. The July 2022 assassination of former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe became an opportunity to inform the world of the seriousness of the Unification Church problem. The perpetrator, Yamagami Tetsuya, revealed his motive as his mother becoming involved with the Unification Church, leading to family breakdown. This incident made Japanese society re-recognize the seriousness of the Unification Church problem, and class action lawsuits by victims continue. Adding a somewhat cynical perspective here, the Abe Prime Minister assassination incident showed that the Unification Church problem is not simply a religious dispute, but a serious security risk threatening social safety and political stability. That a single pseudo-religion could cause an incident that led to the assassination of a country's highest leader starkly demonstrates how significant the ripple effects of this problem can be. Shincheonji damage in Europe is also serious. During the early COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, mass infections that started at Shincheonji's Daegu Church spread overseas, leading to Shincheonji-related confirmed cases in European countries. Particularly in Italy and France, Shincheonji believers entered countries while hiding their religious identity and interfered with epidemiological investigations by health authorities. In Germany, Shincheonji's infiltration began in earnest from 2019. Operating under the name Korean Culture Center in major cities like Berlin, Hamburg, and Munich, Shincheonji infiltrated local Korean churches to steal believers. The German Federal Intelligence Service classified Shincheonji as a socially dangerous group and included it as a surveillance target. In France, Shincheonji was discovered operating while disguised as a secular peace organization. Miviludes, France's government agency for monitoring sects, classified Shincheonji as a destructive cult and issued warnings. Particularly in the Paris area, cases of young French people being recruited by Shincheonji while taking Korean language lessons surged, becoming a social problem. Unification Church activities in Africa are also controversial. Entering Ghana, Côte d'Ivoire, Kenya, and other countries under the guise of economic development support, the Unification Church conducted missionary activities while providing free education and medical services to locals. However, the actual structure was bringing local young people to Korea to convert them to Unification Church believers, then sending them back locally to conduct missionary activities. Damage cases are also emerging in South America. In Brazil, testimonies emerged that Korean and Brazilian believers were suffering forced labor at the New Hope Farm operated by the Unification Church. In Argentina, Shincheonji established cooperative relationships with local universities under the guise of Asian cultural exchange, but the contract was cancelled when missionary activities targeting students were discovered. Damage in Southeast Asia is particularly serious. In the Philippines, reports indicate that the Unification Church colluded with local politicians to secure large-scale land, where believers living collectively are suffering forced labor while cut off from the outside world. In Thailand, Shincheonji is recruiting locals while disguised as yoga centers or meditation centers. In China, both organizations are being cracked down on for illegal religious activities. However, they continue activities in underground organization forms, conducting covert missionary activities, particularly centered on Korean Chinese residential areas. Chinese authorities classify them as cults and crack down strongly, but complete eradication remains difficult. Damage reports related to Shincheonji are also increasing in Australia and New Zealand. Missionary activities targeting young people interested in Korean culture are particularly active, and local Korean churches are uniting to prevent Shincheonji infiltration. A common characteristic of these victims is experiencing mental trauma along with economic losses. Severance from family, social isolation, and identity confusion often make normal social reintegration difficult. Particularly for young victims, life as a whole is often destroyed due to academic interruption and career abandonment. Governments and civil societies in each country are making various efforts to reduce such damage. However, there are limitations to direct regulation due to democratic principles of religious freedom and freedom of expression. Also, effective countermeasures are not easy to establish due to these organizations' cunning disguise techniques and legal response capabilities. The most serious problem is that such damage is harming the trust and solidarity of society as a whole beyond individual and family levels. Distrust in religion, negative perceptions of Korea, and wariness about cultural exchange are spreading, leading to the contraction of even healthy international exchanges. Chapter 4. Counterattacks from each country, responses by governments and civil society. The Japanese government's exercise of questioning rights against the Unification Church in 2022 was a signal that the international community's full-scale counterattack against Korea-originated pseudo-religions had begun. After shockwaves swept through Japanese society following the assassination of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, the Japanese government finally began taking strong legal measures against the Unification Church problem that had been neglected for 60 years. From December 2022, Japan's Agency for Cultural Affairs exercised questioning rights under the Religious Corporation Law to conduct comprehensive investigations of Unification Church internal materials. This was one of the strongest measures the Japanese government had taken against a religious organization. The investigation results revealed the Unification Church's systematic fraud and exploitation of believers in concrete detail, and in October 2023, the Japanese government petitioned the court for a dissolution order against the Unification Church. Japan's such measures also greatly influenced other countries. Governments that had been passive due to the justification of religious freedom began taking more active responses to Korea-originated pseudo-religions. The German federal government has classified Shincheonji as a dangerous sect since 2020 and included it as a surveillance target of the Federal Intelligence Service. Germany had already built a strong response system against destructive cults like Scientology since the 1990s, and Shincheonji was included in this system. German authorities regularly monitor Shincheonji activities and provide warning information to citizens. France is even more active. Miviludes, France's government agency for monitoring sects, classified Shincheonji as a destructive cult and issued official warnings. France established the Cult Prevention Law in 2001, providing strong legal grounds for response to destructive religious groups. Adding a somewhat cynical perspective here, ironically, foreign governments are taking stronger and more systematic responses to Korea-originated pseudo-religions than the Korean government, while Korea, the homeland of these organizations, still shows lukewarm responses under the justification of religious freedom. Foreign countries suffering damage are taking strong measures to protect their citizens. In the United States, responses are being made at the state government level. California strengthened the Cult Victim Protection Act in 2021, simplifying legal remedy procedures for pseudo-religious victims. New York State is strengthening tax audits on Unification Church-related facilities and reviewing religious organization tax exemption benefits. In the UK, the Charity Commission has taken measures to cancel or refuse approval for charity registrations of Unification Church-related organizations. The UK operates a strict charity monitoring system, blocking pseudo-religions from receiving tax benefits by disguising themselves as charities. the Australian government implemented special quarantine measures for Shincheonji-related entrants during the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. Also, Australia's Religious Freedom Commission continuously monitors Shincheonji activities and operates a damage report reception window. Civil society responses are also noteworthy. In Japan, the National Unification Church Victims' Families Association has been active for over 40 years, conducting victim relief and prevention activities. They have considerable influence on government policy, and the recent strong response by the Japanese government is the result of their continuous efforts bearing fruit. In Europe, a coalition of citizen organizations called the Cult Monitoring Network is active. They share information with cult monitoring organizations in each country and conduct victim counseling and prevention education. Information related to Shincheonji and the Unification Church is also shared across Europe through this network. Academic responses are also active. Japanese religious scholars formed a Unification Church Problem Research Group to analyze the Unification Church problem from an academic perspective. In the United States, cult research experts are conducting a Korean origin new religion research project to analyze overseas expansion patterns of the Unification Church and Shincheonji. The media's role is also important. Japan's NHK produced and aired an in-depth documentary on the Unification Church problem, and the BBC conducted investigative reporting on Shincheonji's responsibility for COVID spread. Such media reports play an important role in raising public awareness. Legal community responses are also noteworthy. In Japan, a lawyers' association for Unification Church victims was formed to lead class action lawsuits. In the United States, lawyers specializing in religious fraud provide free legal consultation for Unification Church victims. International organization-level responses are also beginning. The UN Special Rapporteur on Religious Freedom mentioned the overseas expansion problem of destructive religious groups in a 2022 report, urging active responses from governments. Policy discussions on cult problems are also becoming active in the European Parliament. However, despite these responses, there are still many limitations. Direct and strong regulations are difficult due to democratic principles of religious freedom and freedom of expression. Also, these organizations often evade regulations due to their cunning disguise techniques and transformation capabilities. Most importantly, establishing an international cooperation system is crucial. It's difficult to effectively control these border-crossing organizations with just one country's efforts. International cooperation in information sharing, joint responses, and victim protection is urgently needed. Chapter 5. Korea's Responsibility and Image Damage. Things that should not be exported. I heard it's a religious organization from Korea. Is it really trustworthy? This was a question a German university student asked a Korean exchange student when Shincheonji approached under the guise of Korean culture lectures at a university in Berlin, Germany, in 2022. This question contained anxiety and suspicion about Korea. It's a cross-section of the reality where young people who developed favorable feelings toward Korea through K-pop and K-dramas are simultaneously confused by the negative image of Korea equals pseudo-religions. Over the past half-century, Korea has achieved what's called the miracle on the Han River through compressed growth. It has emerged as an economic powerhouse, established democracy, and recently is even recognized as a cultural powerhouse. Hallyu, including K-pop, K-dramas, K-beauty, and K-food, swept the world, greatly enhancing Korea's soft power. However, simultaneously, exports we don't want are also spreading worldwide. These are pseudo-religions like the Unification Church and Shincheonji. Soft power in international relations, unlike hard power such as military or economic power, means the power to influence other countries through the attractiveness of culture, values, and policies. According to this concept, first proposed by Harvard professor Joseph Nye, soft power is attractive power. Hallyu was a representative example of such attractive power. However, the Unification Church and Shincheonji are creating the opposite effect. They are becoming repulsive forces that damage Korea's international image. Adding a somewhat cynical perspective here, while the Korean government invests hundreds of billions of won annually for Hallyu promotion, it shows relatively neglectful responses to pseudo-religious problems that tarnish Korea's image. While the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism works for overseas expansion of K-content, within the same government, the Unification Church and Shincheonji are spreading worldwide with the stigma of K-cults. Korea's international image damage can be confirmed through specific cases. According to a 2022 Gallup poll in the United States, Americans' favorability toward Korea declined by 5 percentage points after the Unification Church problem was highlighted. Particularly, positive response rates to the question, Korea's religions or thoughts are trustworthy, dropped significantly. The situation in Europe is even more serious. According to a 2023 Eurobarometer survey, pseudo-religions ranked third among negative images Europeans have of Korea. First was divided country, and second was high suicide rate. But it's shocking that pseudo-religions are perceived as representative negative images of Korea alongside such structural problems. The situation in Japan is even more serious. After the Abe Prime Minister assassination incident in 2022, Japanese media repeatedly used the expression Korea-originated pseudo-religions while covering the Unification Church problem daily. This is showing signs of Japanese people's feelings toward Korea deteriorating again, despite efforts to improve Korea-Japan relations. Academia is also taking this problem seriously. According to research by Seoul National University's Graduate School of International Studies, Korea's national brand value loss due to the Unification Church and Shincheonji is estimated at approximately 2 trillion won annually. This is about 10 times the budget the government invests for Hallyu promotion. In other words, pseudo-religions are destroying the national image built by Hallyu at a faster pace. Economic ripple effects cannot be ignored either. According to Korea Tourism Organization data, cases of avoiding travel to Korea due to religious-related concerns have increased in some countries since 2022. Particularly in Western Christian countries, tourists who avoid visiting Korea for religious reasons are increasing as the tendency to perceive Korea as a country of pseudo-religions strengthens. It's also negatively affecting cultural exchanges. In 2023, a German university suspended exchange programs with Korean studies departments due to concerns about Shincheonji infiltration. In France, suspicious looks are increasing at events hosted by Korean cultural centers, wondering if religious purposes are hidden. It's also adversely affecting Korean companies' overseas expansion. Some multinational companies have begun adding procedures to check religious backgrounds when reviewing partnerships with Korean companies. This is an additional burden and disadvantage for Korean companies. It's also affecting Korea's status in international organizations. The UN Special Rapporteur on Religious Freedom mentioned overseas expansion of destructive religious groups originating from certain countries in a 2023 report, indirectly pointing to Korea. This shows the danger of Korea being perceived not as an exemplary country upholding religious freedom, but as a country exporting problems. It's also subtly affecting diplomatic relationships. While the Japanese government doesn't mention it officially, it's known to be demanding more active responses to the Unification Church problem from the Korean government through diplomatic channels. The European Union has also unofficially expressed concerns about the Shincheonji problem to the Korean government. What is the Korean government's response in this situation? Unfortunately, it remains passive. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs maintains the position that Religious issues are each country's internal affairs, and the Ministry of Justice hesitates to impose strong regulations, citing guarantee of religious freedom. The Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism focuses only on Hallyu promotion, while being relatively indifferent to eliminating factors that damage Korea's image. However, this is a fundamentally wrong approach. The Unification Church and Shincheonji are not simply religious issues, but problems directly related to Korea's national image and national interests. While damage from them occurs overseas, Korea bears all the responsibility and blame. Therefore, the Korean government should recognize this problem as a national task and respond actively. Most importantly, Korea has moral responsibility to the international community. If pseudo-religions that started in Korea are causing damage worldwide, Korea has an obligation to stop this. This is not simply a legal obligation, but a moral obligation as a member of the international community. For Korea to become a true cultural powerhouse and soft power powerhouse, it must combine positive cultural exports with blocking negative elements. The urgent task is to prevent K-cults from destroying Korea's positive image built by K-pop and K-dramas. Conclusion: the real values we must protect. So far, we have examined how two monsters called the Unification Church and Shincheonji were born in Korea, spread worldwide, and are destroying the lives of innocent people. This is not simply a religious issue or a matter of individual choice. This is a serious social problem threatening human dignity and freedom, and the soundness of our society. What we witnessed was the most hideous form of fraud and exploitation, borrowing the sacred name of religion. They used humanity's most noble emotion of faith to steal money, dismantle families, and destroy individual free will. What's even more serious is that such crimes are spreading worldwide across borders. But there's no need to despair. Human history has been a continuous struggle between good and evil, and truth has always defeated falsehood. However, that victory requires courage, wisdom, and solidarity from all of us. The first value we must protect is truth. No matter how religiously packaged, falsehood is falsehood. Just as Lee Man-hee is not God, and Moon Sun-myung is not the Messiah, we must distinguish truth from falsehood with clear standards. Tolerating falsehood in the name of tolerance is not true tolerance. The second value is human dignity. No religion or ideology can violate basic human rights of individuals. Religious freedom should be guaranteed, but it cannot become a means of violating others' freedom. Human rights violations committed by the Unification Church and Shincheonji cannot be justified by any justification. The third value is family and community. True religion harmonizes families and unites communities. However, pseudo-religions dismantle families and divide society. We can prevent pseudo-religious infiltration by restoring healthy family culture and community spirit. The fourth value is international responsibility. If problems that started in Korea are causing damage worldwide, Korea should take the lead in solving them. This goes beyond simply protecting national image and is a moral obligation as a member of the human community. Adding a somewhat cynical perspective here, if our society were truly a mature democratic society, we should have solved these problems much earlier. However, political interests, religious community opposition, and citizen indifference have worked together to exacerbate the problems. It's not too late even now, so we must all step forward to solve this problem. Solving the Unification Church and Shincheonji problems doesn't end simply with eliminating these two organizations. More importantly, we must improve the social soil where such organizations can emerge. We must solve the internal vulnerabilities modern people have, such as economic inequality, social isolation, and spiritual emptiness. We must also spread healthy understanding of religion, True religion liberates people, teaches love, and pursues peace. However, false religion oppresses people, incites hatred, and causes division. We must clearly recognize these differences and pass them on to the next generation. The role of education is also important. Through education that develops critical thinking skills, rational judgment, and healthy religious views, we must nurture citizens who don't fall for pseudo-religious temptations. This should include character formation and value education beyond simple knowledge transmission. The roles of media and civil society should also be strengthened. Through continuous monitoring and criticism, we must check pseudo-religious activities and represent victims' voices. We must also raise citizens' awareness through accurate information provision. The government's role is even more important. We must pursue balanced policies that guarantee religious freedom while strictly punishing fraud and exploitation. We must also cooperate with the international community to build systems responding to transnational religious fraud. However, most important is the awakening and practice of each individual among us. We must recognize pseudo-religious problems not as others' affairs, but as all our affairs, and actively prevent and respond. Small interests and practices can come together to create big changes. The ultimate goal of all these efforts is to create a world where all people are treated as dignified humans and can enjoy true freedom and peace. Pseudo-religions like the Unification Church and Shincheonji are evil forces that directly deny these values. We must win the fight against them. John 8:32 in the Bible states, "Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." Truth always defeats falsehood, and freedom always defeats oppression. If we stand on the side of truth and fight to the end, we will surely win. Ending the international nuisance of the Unification Church and Shincheonji is an important task our generation must solve. By solving this problem, we can pass on a better world where true freedom, peace, and human dignity are guaranteed to the next generation. I sincerely thank all listeners who thought together about this difficult topic. Your interest and awareness are the beginning of change. If you want deeper analysis and solutions for more social problems, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Your subscriptions, likes, and active participation become the driving force for creating a better society. Let's pursue truth together, realize justice, and create a world overflowing with love. Thank you.